On today's show, we're going to have David Berger on to talk about the Super Bowl and to get his opinion on National Signing Day. Welcome back to the Fan Show. This is our middle of the week show, and we're talking about National Signing Day and the Super Bowl. I'm Alex Berger, and if you're not really sure what National Signing Day is, it's also known as National Letter of Intent Day. If you're a highly recruited football player, or you play fall sport and you got highly recruited by a particular school, well, today is the day where you sign your letter of intent saying that you're going to commit to that particular school that you like and that has recruited you and that has offered you a scholarship. So that's what's going on, and it is a big deal around the state of Georgia because you have so many guys who are highly recruited that come out of this state, and this state is pretty much the new state of Texas. What Texas was 20 years ago is now what the state of Georgia is, and it's not like, because some states in recruiting just kind of get walled in as either a state where you get a lot of skill players or a state where you get a lot of guys that play on the line or linebackers. But the state of Georgia in general is a very eclectic type of state when it comes to recruiting, because you get guys in all shapes of sizes that play ball here in the state of Georgia. So very big deal if you are a guy who's being sought after by a lot of schools around the country, and there are a lot of guys like that are signing their letter of intent. I don't know why at this point in the show I haven't said this already, but here on the Fan Show, we want to give a congratulations to the teams and organizations that win championships, and Sunday night was no different. And I just want to say congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles for winning the Super Bowl. And I was cheering for the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think a lot of America was cheering for the Philadelphia Eagles. If you wanted to um, give a title to a team that is America's team, I know that traditionally is the Cowboys title, but it was Philadelphia on Sunday night. They were America's team. They were the team that majority of America was rooting for. If you weren't a Patriots fan, you were probably rooting for the Eagles. So hats off to their organization, and Nick Foles is just an awesome story. If you don't know the story about Nick Foles, definitely look it up and read it, because I mean, this guy was he started his career off with the Eagles. He was a stat machine, and then he got traded, and then he went from one team in the NFL to the other, and just didn't really do good. I mean, and I guess he didn't really have the cohesiveness anymore when he got traded away and went out to the NFL wasteland. You could say, but man, he really took advantage of his opportunity when Wentz got injured, and it seemed like they didn't really miss a beat. And obviously there were some games where he struggled, but at the same time he didn't struggle too bad, and it was enough to win the critical games they needed to win, especially having the run in the playoffs, and also too that you come out to find out that he's also a Christian and isn't afraid to put his faith out there, to share his faith. So that's something that I definitely respect about him, and him using his platform in a positive way, not to overshadow pretty much what the Eagles have done. So hats off to Nick Foles and also Doug Peterson putting together a spectacular game plan that because it seemed like last year the Falcons' game plan was to pretty much just outscore the Patriots, and then get to the fourth quarter and run the ball. Obviously, that didn't work, and when you played too conservative, that's probably what hurt the Falcons there. But at the same time, I felt like the Eagles designed a game plan where they wouldn't put Tom Brady in a situation, because the Patriots, they have Tom Brady, and once you have Tom Brady, he can get you out of any rut. And he proved that last Super Bowl, but obviously this wasn't the case. So I know a lot of Patriots fans aren't boasting about Captain Thomas Brady, as Saturday Night Live coined that phrase. I love that. I love that name, Captain Thomas Brady. It just sounds so elegant and so just gentleman-like, I guess you could say. I can't really think of a word that could back that up. But yeah, unfortunately, Captain Thomas Brady couldn't come up with the victory, and just hats off to the Eagles. But we're going to have David Berger to talk more about that game, but just a tremendous... Now we're going to have David Berger on, and David, the last time he was on my show, he said that he was a Patriots fan. Made that very clear and obvious. And one of the reasons why I'm bringing him back so soon is because he is a Patriots fan. So I still want to get the angle of what he's going through and what he's had to stomach the last 24 to 48 hours. And just to bring you guys a different perspective. Also, too, he is a friend of the show. He always gives great college football material to us, and definitely appreciate that. Always gives a great college football perspective that I don't think a lot of people in this industry really have. So let's just all be nice and just go easy on David. David's had a kind of a rough 48 hours to sort through. Without further ado, David Berger.
Well, right now we just want to welcome David Berger onto the fan show. He was the old voice of the Roswell Hornets and very active in the sports community in North Fulton in the Forsyth area. Right now he is coaching, but unfortunately his seasons are pretty much over for this year, but looking forward to the fall of 2008 when it comes to getting back into that coaching mindset and mode. But David has come on the show to talk about National Signing Day, also to talk about his reaction to the Super Bowl. Always glad to have him on, and yes, he is my brother. If you're wondering why we both have the same last name, David, how are you doing today, man?
Pretty good, not too bad. Kind of a long day, but it was a good day. So, rain was pretty heavy in the beginning of the day, so it's been kind of gloomy all day, but overall pretty good.
Yeah, the weather sucked, but other than that, especially if you're a Georgia Bulldogs fan, it's a pretty good day considering you lost the national championship, and it seems like on a day like today, this is kind of the alternative prize that you get for going to the national championship. Georgia right now, and it's pretty much going to be the end of the day where the stocks close in recruiting, and it looks like the Georgia Bulldogs are going to end up being the number one class in the nation.
Yeah, and that's according to multiple websites, not just, one or two, but it looks like across the board, Georgia really, scarfed up a lot of good talent looking into this class. They got 8 5-star recruits, which is the most Georgia's ever had, tied for the most of all time of any school. They got 13 4-star recruits, and then, a couple 3-star and a couple 2-star. But overall, Georgia's a big winner today. It's interesting, you and I, before we got on, we're talking about, the top 10 in recruiting. And the one thing I noticed, Alex, is that it's pretty much spread across the board, across the country. There's not one conference that's over-dominating another. There's not one region or area of the country that's over-dominating another. I mean, in the top 5, you have Georgia, Ohio State, Penn State, Clemson, Penn State, and I forget the 5th team. And they're off the top of my head, But then you also had Alabama at 6, which is interesting because from a Bama perspective, this will be, if they stay at 6 or at least stay out of the top 5, this will be the first time in about a decade Alabama has finished recruiting outside of the top 5. So this is kind of big for Bama. They haven't been this far back in recruiting. And it's funny, if you say they're out of the top 5, it's, kind of a huge loss in recruiting for Alabama. But for Georgia's perspective, this is arguably the best recruiting class they've ever had. Kirby Smart did a pretty good job last year bringing in some quality guys. Dick Fromm was a piece of that. Not a lot of people, he wasn't as heavily recruited as some other guys like Richard LeCount, for example. But overall, Kirby Smart, in his 3rd recruiting year for Georgia, has brought in a monster recruiting class and by far the best in the nation overall.
Yeah, I just want to stay in the Georgia camp for right now, but we'll get to Alabama, David. It seemed like that during the first recruiting signing cycle, that it seemed like we got all the guys that we wanted, all the guys that committed back in the summer, signed their letter of intent back in December, and it seemed like just that we might pick up a couple of guys during this next cycle that we're going on, but nothing to dramatically change our position in recruiting. I'm a little surprised, like what we just mentioned about Alabama, that Alabama didn't either dethrone Georgia or at least get in that number 2 slot. But right now I just want to focus on Georgia and getting a guy like Quavon Walker, and also going out of the state to the state of Texas, getting a guy like Tommy Bush at receiver, I feel like is one of the things that really set this Georgia class apart. And it seems like Kirby Smart, since day one, always has this mentality that him and his staff are going to outwork you. If they're going to dominate recruiting, they are just going to just absolutely outwork you, and that's what we saw today.
Yeah, I was about to say, it really is transparent today with who they brought in. And you made a good point about the early signing period in December. Georgia, stacked up, and everybody said, all right, Georgia's got the best recruiting class, but will they hold it, going into National Signing Day in February? Well, today rolls around, and Georgia still stays consistent. They had about 5 guys on their big board that they really, really wanted to get and really bring in today, and I believe they got at least 4 of them. So I'll say that, the addition of Quay Walker is going to be amazing, and just the way he did it, I think, kind of inspired a lot of Georgia fans as he threw shade at Tennessee. He put on a Tennessee hat,
right,
stands up, chucks it into the crowd, and then shows that he's got a Georgia shirt on, Georgia pants, puts on a Georgia hat and everything. So, he already has won over all of Georgia and all of Bulldog Nation. But you mentioned the wide receiver out of Texas. Georgia lost, Javen Wims as a senior and everything, and so Terry Godwin's going to have to step up. Mecole Hardman's going to have to step up, which they totally can, and I'm not saying they won't. But at the same time, Georgia's filling needs where they need to be. Getting a wide receiver. Well, Georgia lost a senior wide receiver. I think I've said it. I'm a Georgia fan. Sorry, I said we, but Georgia lost a senior wide receiver. And so picking up another wide receiver kind of fills that void. somebody else to step in if needed. You also got Jason Stanley at Georgia that will get a little bit more playing time next year, and Jeremiah Holloman, which will get more playing time next year. So, Georgia didn't just, go through recruit, and they weren't necessarily rebuilding. Georgia today really proved that they are in the mindset of Alabama, or like Alabama, in terms of they're not rebuilding, but they are reloading. And Georgia proved it today. Kirby Smart, again, puts together a great class. He did the past 2 years. Obviously, his classes weren't as good as this one, or at least highly touted as this one. But what Kirby Smart pulled off today, not only is it very impressive, especially in year 3, but at the same time, what he did today reloads Georgia, not just for this, not just looking into 2018, but also gets them prepared for 19 and 20 and looking into the future. Kirby's going to be one of the best recruiters in the nation for other coaches and other programs that are going to have to deal with.
David, I just want to ask you about Quay Walker, and that's a really good point that you made because definitely it felt like, as a Georgia fan myself too, that Georgia recruited better based off of Georgia, but this is, I feel like, too, where Kirby Smart has taken that next step. Hey, let's just not recruit outside of our means. Let's be the most dominant and the best program in the country when it comes to recruiting. And right now, Georgia is holding that mantle. But losing a guy like losing our outside linebacker in Roquan Smith, having a guy like Quay Walker now, I don't want to predict a 18-year-old's future right now, but do you think that over time you're going to see Quay Walker fill in that role that the Dawgs are going to lose with losing Roquan Smith to the draft?
Yeah, you may not see it this year. It may not play out. I mean, Kirby has no problem playing true freshmen, obviously. Jake Fromm's probably the best example of that. But over the past 2 years, Kirby, within his first couple games each season, has played an average of about anywhere from 14 to 17 true freshmen. So you may see him get playing time, especially with Georgia's opening game is Austin Peay. So it's a small school. So, hopefully if the offense is clicking, they'll put up points, be able to sub in a lot of people, get people some experience. So you may see him, him step up at a role, in a role like Roquan Smith did, needing, that outside linebacker presence. And, you're replacing a Butkus Award winner. So, yeah, there's going to be some drop-off with the next guy up. But at the same time, Georgia's in full position where they are very much of the mentality next man up. Somebody's got to fill the position if, the first string guy's not working out, or if he gets hurt for whatever reason, that someone else has to step in and fill that position. So Georgia's doing a very good job of this. And, like you said earlier, this just goes to show how hard Kirby Smart's working. But Kirby Smart isn't just, doing well in recruiting, though. It's kind of showing in the fact that, past 3 years, Georgia's been top 10 recruiting class, that this is going to be a trend from here on out. Georgia's going to be a team to contend with, not just, in the SEC recruiting, but nationally as well. And being located in the state of Georgia, he's got one of the best states to recruit from. So, this is just one example. Quay Walker's is, again, one example of how good it can get for Georgia. But at the same time, the program, you don't want to sell the program into one kid and only one kid. So Kirby's got, a plethora of kids to choose from this with this class coming in. And, Georgia's just ready to rock and roll. They're ready to probably get started. Once these kids come on campus, it's, no holds back, no holds bar, and they're just going to go after it. And hopefully for Kirby it works out great. And Georgia starts, getting past that, the burden of having lost the national championship. They move past it and say, you know what, new year, new team, and they're ready to rock and roll come the fall.
Yeah, I think that's interesting about Quavon Walker. I feel like Tommy Bush is going to eventually fill the role of Javon Wims, who had a really big impact this year on Georgia's offense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Bush will fit that role. He could possibly be a good deep threat. He's got some speed to him, too, so he's a lot like Javen Wims. For Georgia fans from long ago, he could possibly be like A.J. Green. Now, to me, Javen Wims played a lot like A.J. Green.
Right, he did.
A lot of the attributes that A.J. Green had when he was in Athens, and that A.J. Green has shown in his career in Cincinnati. But, Bush could be a good replacement to Javen Wims eventually with that deep threat. But, next year is going to be very interesting to see how they use their wide receivers. Jeremiah Holloman is a decent deep threat, not as tall as Javen Wims, but still, he can catch the ball. He can climb the ladder, get up there and catch the ball. So he's got all the athletic intangibles and all the athletic ability to do it. But Bush will give those receivers some competition. So even a true freshman, never played college ball, he'll still give those receivers competition.
Now, you mentioned at the beginning of the show that there's pretty much a clean sweep for Georgia, which you haven't really seen that happen. The last time you saw that really happen was with Alabama, either last year or a couple of years ago. It seemed like they've always swept the top spot in recruiting. Now that has turned to the Dawgs, but going across the board here, that with the major three, with ESPN, with Rivals, and 24/7 Sports, their top three is all the same. And you usually don't see something like that in a recruiting cycle. But I just want to touch first on Ohio State and Texas. I knew with Texas that Texas would make a big splash recruiting-wise eventually with Tom Herman as their head coach, because I knew that he was a young, new, energetic guy, and it seems like recruits like that type of personality, like someone that's new, because I feel like Georgia right now is in that same boat, that you have a young guy, and also, too, there's a lot of new facilities going up at Georgia, and Georgia's winning, but outside of that, I feel like Tom Herman is I want to say a close third or fourth, but also, too, with Ohio State. Now, Ohio State, it's impressive that they did make the top slot, but they didn't get a lot of five-star guys. They got 3 5-star guys, and they got 18 4-stars. So, do you feel like the type of program that Ohio State's putting together that they could make a national championship run, or do you feel like they'll still get to the playoff and still be stagnant once they get to the national championship?
Tom Herman's a great recruiter. He was at Houston, so this kind of isn't surprising. It'll be interesting to see how he puts the pieces together. But in terms of Ohio State, I could totally see them contending for the Big Ten. Totally see them winning the Big Ten. Nobody else has really put up any competition. I mean, Wisconsin did a very good job, obviously going undefeated up until the Big Ten title game. But overall, Ohio State's going to be year in, year out a big contender. Michigan hasn't really shown anything. Harbaugh's, great recruiter Harbaugh is, but he's proven to be kind of overrated when it comes to putting, when toe meets leather on the field. So, Ohio State really doesn't have much competition. Michigan State should be a decent competition, but with everything shaken down after all those lawsuits have come out, and after the big, that big scandal the big sexual assault scandal that's hit the university, you don't know how Michigan State's going to drop off after that. So Ohio State's pretty much in gear to just really contend with Wisconsin, Michigan State, and maybe Michigan.
Interesting. Now I just want to talk about Alabama, and right now on 24/7 they're 6th, also on ESPN they're 6th, but on Rivals they dropped to 12th, and this is very un-Nick Saban-like. And do you think that kids aren't buying Nick Saban like they were in the past because he's put together a very consistent program that wins consistently, but do you think that kids are more attractive now to go into a place like Ohio State or going to a young Kirby Smart who is winning there at Georgia, or even someplace like Miami where Mark Richt seems like he's attracting a lot of guys and closing off that wall in South Florida?
It's hard to say, Alex, because, it's really hard to gauge, the thoughts and the process an 18-year-old goes through to get to this point, especially with so much coming at them, especially with social media these days. Very different than when we were in high school and 20 years ago, and so forth. But, every program's selling it a different way. Alabama obviously says, you want to play for a national championship, come here. Georgia's now selling it as, you want to be a team that, can make it that far and do a lot of good things, come here. And there's other people that, Ohio State's selling it kind of the same way. You want to play for the conference, you want to make, you want to give it a shot at playing in the, in the playoffs, come here. So each school is selling it a different way. The way they go about things is a little bit different, but at the same time, you just got to gauge it differently depending on the kid, depending on the position, depending on the need of the school. So everything's a little bit different depending on where you go.
Gotcha. It's, like I said, it's just really surprising to see Alabama slip this much, because I thought, if I were to put money on it, that Alabama would be in the number 2 spot at the end of the day, and it just doesn't seem like they're moving. So, do you just feel like the tide is shifting a little bit?
Possibly, but then again, this recruiting is something, especially changes in recruiting, and like which conference is dominating versus which team may be gaining ground. Sometimes you have to look at this in terms of like span of 5, almost 10 years.
Right.
Immediate reaction would say, that there is a shift going. Georgia's gone, higher and higher in the rankings each year. Now it's first in the nation. So if you look at it within the past 3 years, definitely. If you look at it within the past 5 years, a little bit. And then if you look at it within the past 10 years, not so much. But at the same time, if you started, 3 years ago, it's changed a lot. So it just depends on what time frame and time reference you look at it. But I think now you'll see Georgia more within that top 5 and arguably top 3 ranking every year.
Right. And do you feel like that if we were to push the panic button on Alabama, maybe we don't do it this year, but if they start to be a little bit more consistent in this and somehow just end up in that top 5, top 10 area, then should we show concern for Alabama if they do it more consistently?
Well, I'm pretty sure Alabama doesn't have a panic button, or they don't know what it is. So with that said, Alabama finishing out in the top 5, they're not going to like that. But top 5 in recruiting is top 5. I mean, top 5, you're one of the best, arguably, in the nation. You're going up maybe a couple teams from different conferences, but overall, if you're top 5, you're a darn good team. So I don't think there's room to press the panic button. I don't even know if they have one in Tuscaloosa. But if I was a Bama fan, I'd just say, you know what, Georgia's done well. I can see why they're recruiting so well. But at the same time, I'm not pushing the panic button if I'm a Bama fan. I'm not even close to it.
There's no panic button in Tuscaloosa. That's pretty funny. With these rankings right now, is there any team that stands out to you?
I mean, obviously Georgia grabs you. It's kind of no surprise, really. I mean, Georgia, Ohio State too. I mean, it's all pretty much where it usually is, except for Bama being lower than most people would think. So, other than Bama's ranking and possibly Georgia's ranking, nothing really much surprises me this year.
Do you feel like down in Miami that because obviously when you talk about the ACC right now, Clemson is the king of the hill, but Miami, it looks like they're turning into a close second. So the way they finished today, do you feel like Miami is going to be one of those programs that you're going to pay attention to in college football going forward?
Yeah, Miami's got to keep doing this year in, year out. Miami's got to keep being like that top 10 team every year. They got to keep doing this consistently. Again, they're in probably the best recruiting area in the nation in South Florida, so they have all the tools and all the talent down there right in front of them. But, yeah, Mark Richt's got to keep churning this out every year. They got to be top 10 every year for Miami to get back to being, I guess, if the U really is back. So, with that said, Miami's got to stay consistent with this. They can't just let this be a one-year deal.
Right. But are you pleasantly surprised with what has happened during this recruiting cycle? Because it seemed like, especially, people were kind of harping on today because this is the first year where you had the new signing period back in December. That you have two signing periods right now, this one and the one back in December. And it seemed like a lot of people, since a lot of the big names have already signed back in December, a lot of people weren't being too high on this or hyping up this day. But it seems like, for me personally, experiencing it today, that it's still pretty exciting because you still find out where your team's finished. So, David, do you share any of that enthusiasm, or are you kind of like the rest of the media right now who pretty much just doesn't really care?
I mean, at the same time, I don't get into, I don't hype up recruiting that much personally. I don't really get into it personally, but at the same time, it's important, but to me, it's not everything because, you always hear stories about kids that were not really heavily recruited that turn out to be NFL MVPs. Then you hear about kids that were heavily recruited that don't do much anything. So
right.
It's really hit or miss. It all gets down to coaching. It all gets down to how the kid responds to the culture on campus, responds to the culture within the program, how that kid becomes a part of the team. So, yeah, recruiting is obviously, kind of the end-all be-all in college, but there's a lot that goes into it after it. And a lot of people focus on, oh, my gosh, we got these many 5-star. Oh, my gosh, you got these many 4-stars. They could all be busts. You don't know that. None of them could play ever.
Right.
How much effort they give when they get there. It just depends on how, hungry they are to succeed and hungry they are to show what they can do. So, at the end of the day, is it important? Yes, but it's kind of like a double-edged sword. You can be really good. You can be a really good player and still not do well in college. You could be, not the best high school player, get marginally recruited, and then end up being, the next Tom Brady or J.J. Watt, for example. So,
right.
It's kind of a double-edged sword. You don't know exactly what you're getting into. You're investing the future of a program into an 18-year-old kid.
Right.
And, by that I mean about 20 18-year-old kids. So, it's it's one of the biggest risks in all of sports.
Right. And also too, a lot of kids come in with the mentality that everything transfers.
Yeah. So.
Now I just want to switch gears, and I know this is probably a subject you don't want to talk about, but last time I had you on the show, we were talking about the Super Bowl, and obviously you're a Pats fan, and it seemed like, Dave, you felt cautiously optimistic, but this time it didn't really go into y'all's favor. So I just want to know, how are you doing with this, and how has the last 48 hours, how's the last 48 hours been for you?
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it sucks to lose, to have your team lose the Super Bowl, but at the same time, you got to give tip your hat to Philadelphia. Doug Peterson, second-year coach, did a hell of a job getting his team prepared. He played without any inhibition, didn't hold anything back, left it all out on the field. Nick Foles played out of his mind. And at the end of the day, Brady played out of his mind, arguably his statistically best playoff game ever, and they didn't win it. So it got down to, Philadelphia executed on offense better than the Patriots did on defense. And, Malcolm Butler being out of the game for whatever reason, that played a big factor into it. How much of a big factor, we'll never know. But at the same time, Philadelphia did a fantastic job on both sides of the ball. There was one punt the whole game that shows you how effective the offenses were. Brady threw for over 500 yards. Foles torched New England's secondary. And they, New England just didn't have an answer at the end of the day. And the strip sack in the end, that was the one area that I said that could be a big problem with the defensive line versus the offensive line, or Philly's defense versus New England's offense. And the one time the defensive line really burned New England was when it costed them the most. So, you got to give a lot of credit to the Eagles. They did a fantastic job of shutting down the Patriots and shutting down their defense. I mean, their offense tore them apart. Brady played a great game again, but at the same time, Philly just executed better. They just outplayed them. I don't know if you would necessarily say they outcoached them. I thought the coaching on both sides was easy, but, maybe Belichick outcoached himself by, taking Malcolm Butler out for whatever reason. So, props to them. Props to the Eagles. First Super Bowl ever in the franchise's history. So you got to give them credit where credit's due. And, as again, never want to be on the losing end of a Super Bowl, but at the same time, you got to give Philly credit. And they did a hell of a job preparing, heck of a job implementing what they did, and they executed to perfection. So, you got to give props to the Eagles on that.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things, better to be in the arena than not to be in the arena. But I wanted to ask you about Malcolm Butler. Why do you think the Patriots decided to bench him?
Well, I think there was a couple aspects. I know he was a little bit sick going into the week, and so apparently it was just a football decision that Belichick made, and apparently he may not have had the best week in practice, and he just thought that Richards and Batamosi and Eric Rowe would have had a better matchup against Philadelphia's receivers, and especially with Gilmore going up against Alshon Jeffrey later in the game. So it was just a football decision, and at the end of the day, it may have cost the Patriots a Super Bowl. We'll never know, but at the same time, it is what it is. It's a football decision. So, as a Pats fan, I got to side with Belichick and just respect the decision. May not be what we all wanted or what we all liked, but at the end of the day, Belichick said he was doing what he thought was best, and if Malcolm didn't have the best week in practice, Belichick maybe foresaw that he may not have had the best game. So everybody would have said, Malcolm Butler could have covered this better, could have covered this play better. We don't really know that. We'll never know
right.
that. I trust Belichick, so I just got to trust his judgment on this. But it is what it is. We lost. We got to move on. We're on to 2018.
I guess it's one of those things, too, that fans and just spectators and media people hang on to that one thing and try to justify one thing that lost the game. And
yeah.
I guess this is Malcolm Butler for the Patriots. Last year, it was Matt Ryan taking a sack on second down, and a lot of people criticized them for not running the ball. So I guess it's just one of those scapegoat type things where people want to justify things, but that's unfortunate. I just want to ask you too, because Josh McDaniels is kind of taking his time with the Colts thing right now. Also, too, you have your guy.
Well, he backed out of the Colts job last night.
Right, he did. But you also have your guy Patricia going to being the head coach for the Detroit Lions. So, do you think that right now Belichick is considering retirement?
No, not right now. He'll be back next year, but maybe within the next 5 years or so, possibly. They'll never say this. The organization will never release this, but I just have a strong feeling that they're going to groom McDaniels to be the next head coach for the Patriots. They're going to give him more money next year going into it. So Kraft has said, "Hey, we're going to give you more money, McDaniels, if you come back." And I don't know if they'll release this to the media, but it seems like they said, "Hey, would you rather eventually become the Patriots head coach, or would you want to be the Colts coach right now?" And, I think anybody in their right mind would choose the first option of being the Patriots head coach eventually, rather than going into the dumpster fire that is Indianapolis right now.
Say this is true. Say this is kind of like the backdoor decision type thing that the Patriots have made. We've seen this a lot in college, and you saw it with Will Muschamp at Texas, who was publicly guaranteed the Texas head coach job when Mac Brown retired. And you've seen it in other situations that it just seemed like it didn't work out. So if this is the case, do you think Daniels is going to be locked into this deal?
Yeah. I mean, I think I can possibly see him being the head coach eventually of the Patriots, but not for a handful of years. So I think McDaniels, I think he's in it for the long haul.
Do you think Patricia is the right man over in Detroit for the Lions?
If he gets the right people in place, which looking at his staff, he's got some good people in place. Paul Pasqualoni's coming over. Also, George Gott's going to be their offensive coordinator. Gotts used to work with the Patriots. He's got another guy, name escapes me at the moment, that's also coming, that used to be with the Patriots. So he's bringing some familiar faces to himself and to the NFL. So I think Patricia will be all right, but then again, he's just got to put the pieces together. If he can do well, it may not be successful his first year, but he's got some good talent, especially with Stafford on offense, and he's got some solid wide receivers and Golden Tate. But at the same time, the defense is what really has hurt Detroit in the past couple of years. So if there's a guy that can fix the defense, it's going to be Patricia. So I think Detroit could be on the up and up looking into the next couple of years.
What about Gronkowski? Because there's rumor mill going around right now that he might consider backing out of the Patriots and playing elsewhere.
Yeah, I've heard some of that. Mostly I've heard of retirement, not necessarily him leaving the Patriots. But at the same time, only time will tell. He'll probably give it a couple of weeks after the season and then kind of make his decision. I'd be kind of surprised if he left to just retire. But at the same time, he's got to do what's best for himself. He took a couple of big hits this year. He's had some surgeries in the past on his shoulder, on his back. So, Gronk can only take so much as big of a guy as he is. People think he's indestructible, but nobody really is at that sport, playing such a collision sport as football is.
Right.
But I could see Gronk coming back. I could also possibly see him retiring. I honestly think he'll come back. That's my prediction. I think he will come back. Give it at least maybe 1 or 2 more years. If anything, him and Tom may go out in the same year. So,
you think that might be another backdoor deal that they'll be like, that him and Gronk would be like, hey Tom, I want to go out the same year as you.
Possibly. You never know.
That would be interesting. That would be kind of funny at the same time. I would get a good laugh out of that. But thank you for coming on the show today, David. Really appreciate your insight into National Signing Day, also to what's going on with the Patriots. If there is a way to get in contact with you, if people who listen to the show want to get in contact with you and ask you more questions about this conversation, what's a great place to contact you at? And hey, we're not giving out phone numbers, but yeah, where's a great place?
The national election. Now that happens every 4 years, so NBC, ABC only has to prepare for that every 4 years, and that is probably the busiest time that you'll ever see in a newsroom if you've worked in a newsroom. But what those guys do on National Signing Day is, in my opinion, the same type of work, and it's the equivalent to that, but you do that every year, and now you do that twice a year. Now, granted, I'm not saying like it's the outcome that they have to put out, that they have to put into it to get the result of the broadcast that they're doing. Now, the election broadcasts obviously are more significant, and obviously there's more on the line. But still, there's a lot of things happening in the span of 5 hours, and it's a lot to keep track of. So, I'm saying, if you want to get into broadcasting, try to get into ESPNU, try to get on their game day coverage. Because if you could make it in that world, then you're going to make it in CNN or NBC or ABC for the election coverage. But again, I just want to tip my hat off to them. They do a great job analyzing a bunch of athletes and figuring out where they're going to go and giving them props and analyzing things like that also too. You put on top of it interviewing a bunch of head coaches, and it's just a control room that has a lot going on in a short amount of time, and that's pretty much election coverage. So hats off to those guys. They do a heck of a job. I mean, they're on air for over 5 hours, and I can tell you, doing that for 5 hours, oh my gosh. I mean, I used to call high school football games, and I thought that was a lot. But being on air, being on it for 5 hours is no easy task. And props to also to the producers, because I saw they had Mac Brown on there. I saw Mac Brown was struggling a little bit, and I saw they pulled him off there and got someone else to take his place. I can't think of his name. I want to say Joey Galloway, but I don't think that's it. But it's a guy who does the same job Mac Brown does. So props to that producer. Also, too, there was a lot today that had to do with just antics, childish antics. Um, and the first thing about it is I want to go to the Georgia commit, Quavon Walker. Now, Quavon, when he made his announcement, he had a couple of hats, and everyone has a couple of hats when they make their choices that they have on the table, and when they have it in the high school gym, and when it's all big old hoopla. Yeah, that's pretty common. So he had a bunch of hats, and one of them was Tennessee. Now, for some reason, when he made his choice to commit to the University of Georgia, he swatted at the Tennessee hat and just kind of just threw it on the ground like it was nothing. And I felt like a lot of people made a lot of to do over that, and I can see why. I'm not justifying the young man on his actions. I think his actions were wrong, but at the same time, I can understand where that comes from. I can understand probably what he's thinking, because I'm assuming that he's been recruited by Tennessee for a long time, and that Tennessee was on him. Like that was one of the guys that was going to make their class at Tennessee, and I can definitely see that. So even though he's leaning towards Georgia and he wants to commit to the University of Georgia because he likes what Kirby Smart has going on, Mel Tucker has at the University of Georgia. But at the same time, he's getting hounded by Tennessee. It's kind of like you like this one girl, and you know this one girl's into you. So you wanna make her your girlfriend, and you do that. Well, at the same time, there's another girl that likes you, but you don't feel the same way about her. And she's pushing just as hard. Maybe she's not in the same league as you think this other girl is, but this other girl probably thinks that she is. So she's going to push just as hard. And so I get where he would come from with swatting the hat or doing whatever he did with the hat, the antics that he did, because he doesn't want to go to that school. Now, he doesn't have to express it in that way, but at the same time, once you've been hounded by a certain program, and I'm pretty sure by now the guy either knows that what Tennessee's offering can't happen, that they're cashing checks their body just can't handle, and or their program just can't live up to that expectations, or he wants to win a championship, and he's going to have a better opportunity to win a championship at Georgia right now than he is at Tennessee. That's just the facts that are going on. So even though Tennessee thinks for some reason with this kid that they're on the same playing field, this kid knows that his mind's made up and he's going to Athens. But still Tennessee keeps on coming. They don't give up. And that's probably one of the great things about men is that they don't have that mentality, but they don't know when to stop. And that's exactly what the University of Tennessee did. They didn't know when to stop. And the kid got annoyed by it. And the kid made a scene when he was choosing his school. And yes, that probably was disrespectful. And the University of Tennessee might have taken it disrespectfully. But I've seen other antics like this. And like I said, I'm not justifying what the kid did. I think it's wrong. I think it's kind of annoying, and it kind of shows your maturity where you're at right now. But this was also addressed in Kirby Smart's press conference on Wednesday. And he said, you know what? Yeah, he might have done that, and I wasn't paying attention to that because I was watching game film, but guess what? when we get him here, he's going to get that out of his system. And I like that. I like that, hearing that from a head coach. That, you know what? Yeah, he might have these maturity problems, but we're going to help fix those problems. So going forward, Quavon Walker and his maturity problems are going to get fixed when he goes to the University of Georgia. Also, too, there was another kid, and I kind of felt sad for him, even though he committed to the University of Florida. And I don't really want to bring up his name because I don't really feel like it's worth it. But if you followed recruiting, you know who I'm talking about. But there was a kid who committed to the University of Florida, and that was like the wild card school. So the guy committed to the wild card school, to the school that his family did not expect that he would commit to the University of Florida. They were thinking it was either going to be Tennessee or Alabama. Well, what ends up happening is this is in a high school gym with all of these people on you. And by the way, it's on national television on ESPNU. And so the kid puts on the Gator hat. And then as the kid's putting on the Gator hat, the mom walks away. Like the mom just like literally takes her thing, walks away from his son, and just leaves him there. And I can tell that that household is divorced, because I see the father in the background, and the father's already remarried, or I don't know if he's remarried, but he had some significant other, and it was pretty obvious to see that. So yeah, it was a sad situation that the mother, because he didn't like where the kid was going, automatically just walks off stage. And I think she makes yeah, she doesn't put herself in the best light. I'll just put it that way. But she comes back later and gives him a hug. So she redeems herself with that. But still, where have we gotten to? Because the kid was dressed up in all red, and you had the family members were Tennessee stuff. You also had the family members were Alabama stuff. And then the kid just does a 360 and commits to the University of Florida. Like, it's kind of one of those middle of nowhere wild card type things that he does, and I don't know if he does it just to get under the skin of his parents, or if Florida was actually the place he wanted to go, if he wanted to play wide receiver and he felt like he fit in well into Dan Mullen's system. Who knows? But at the same time, this isn't the first time I've seen this happen. And it was a kid that Alabama wanted. And the kid committed to Alabama, but the mother wanted him to go to LSU. And she was just sitting there in the chair pretty pouty. She didn't leave or anything like that, but she was pretty pouty, and she wanted her son to commit to LSU because they were from Louisiana. So this isn't the first time we've seen these type of antics before on National Signing Day. They do happen more often than we would probably like to admit and like to see, but I guess this is the world that we live in nowadays, and it's just sad to see that. Also, too, I want to go back to the kid who committed to the University of Florida, and I don't know, and here's where the fan advice comes in, because I don't know what your relationship with your parents is like. Obviously, I think just from a casual observation, it's probably a little bit distant. And I don't want to judge, or I don't want to speculate exactly what's going on there at home. But it seems like there is some sort of disconnect, that you didn't feel comfortable talking to your parents about where you wanted to go. And I'm not trying to throw shade of a kid that doesn't feel that way. But at the same time, if it was my child and it was my son up there, and I'm not a parent, I'm a single man, I've never experienced parenthood, so I'm pretty much saying I don't know what I'm talking about, but at the same time, I have a pretty good idea what kids need, and one of the things is support, and they need to feel trusted. They need to feel like they can have trust in their parents. So, if it was my son, I hope that I, as a parent, kept the lines of communication open and kept a trust and a bond there where he could tell me, hey, Dad, I think I want to go to the University of Florida. Well, that's great, son. And if, like I've said before, I'm a Georgia fan on here, and that's pretty obvious if you've listened to other podcasts that I put together. So, if my son did want to go to the University of Florida, I would totally support him, but I would hope that he's making the right decisions, that if that's a place that's in a line where he wants to go academically, and also too if that's where he feels like he can compete on the football team to have a shot to start or to play, or if that's the team that he wants to be on. Amen. You gotta let him go, and I would be totally supportive of that. But even though it would be kind of a hard pill to swallow that my son is a Florida Gator, but at the same time, I want to be supportive. I want to be loving towards my son. When I brought him into this world, it's kind of like that's where my loves go. That's where my love goes. And I hope if you're a parent that you have that same sort of attitude and mindset with your child, and hopefully that you can keep the lines of communication open, you can keep the trust open, and good luck if you are a parent and you're listening to this and you have teenagers. I know it is a job, and it is work, and I'll be praying for you, and best of luck. But hopefully through this experience that we can learn that we can just keep the lines of communication open, and just respect others, even if they are annoying you. But let's just show some grace. Let's show some grace. Let's show some love to one another. I guess that's what this world is missing, and it's pretty obvious if you turn on the news. So that's my fan advice. And if you're curious about the fan show, we are a part of fansfavoritefan.com. We've already got a lot of great articles up. We got an article that recently came out about the NFL awards. Also, too, we have some articles on National Signing Day. So be sure to check out those articles. We've got a lot of great content on the website right now. And I just want to thank David Berger for giving his opinions on National Signing Day. Also, too, what happened in the Super Bowl and what's currently going on with the New England Patriots. That's an interesting situation. But if you want to weigh in on National Signing Day, what's going on with the New England Patriots, be sure to leave that in the comment section, either in the YouTube page or on the SoundCloud page, because we definitely, I want to hear what you guys are thinking, what you think of the show, or just what you want to plug in. That's the best way to just have immediate interaction with the show, because we'd love to see you guys' comments. Also, too, the like button goes a long way. If you don't feel like commenting and you don't feel like writing stuff down, but you like what we put together, I would definitely appreciate it if you could just hit that like button, because that like button goes a long way, and I think a lot of people realize in this internet age that we are in. So, by the way, if you want to follow me on Twitter, or you want to holler at me on Twitter, I definitely would appreciate both. You can find me at Alexander71004. One day I'm going to shorten it, guys. One day. But right now it is Alexander71004. That is my Twitter handle. But hope you guys have an amazing day. Thanks again for listening. And be sure to check us out this weekend, because we are going to put up another podcast that'll be coming at you soon.